Hello again. Good morning again. Gaudete, Steel Eye Span, possibly the most famous users of the word. It's a Christmas album that I used to have with that song on it. And then that other one by Mike Oldfield, which has got no words, that one, which I always thought was called Gaudete because it was quite cheerful. And it turns out it's not that one at all. But it still means rejoice, which is quite nice. And we get the word, as our incredibly educated children pointed out, it's a Latin word, and it comes from Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 to 6, which in English is rejoice in the Lord always, I will say it again, rejoice. But because all these things used to be read in Latin, they're generally named for the first word. So it's Gaudete Dominus Semper, which is quite nice. And that idea of rejoicing is throughout the Bible. I mean, all of the readings that we've had today, going all the way back to Isaiah, and then one from early in Luke, one from later in Luke, they're all to do with this idea of joy and being joyful. And so we see that in Mary's story. And in the part of Luke chapter 1 that we had today is, again, if you want to get in there with the Latin, is sometimes called the Magnificat. Ooh. These are words you really want to impress your other church friends. You go, oh yes, Gaudete Magnificat. Which makes no sense, but it makes you sound good. Generally, the more Catholic people get, the less they're going to be impressed because they'll know what it actually means. But, you know, in the free church, sounds good to us. Anyway, sorry, I'm distracting myself, not you. So this is the Magnificat, or Mary's song. And this is this great bit where Mary gets told what's going on, that the angel Gabriel appears and says, Mary, you are blessed and you are going to be the mother of Jesus, who's going to be the Son of God. And she's quite excited about it. And she goes off to stay with Elizabeth, who is her cousin relative of some kind. And she's already pregnant with John the Baptist. And when Mary turns up, John leaps in the womb, which is unusual and quite cool. And Elizabeth is like, oh, this is unusual and quite cool. And she blesses Mary and says, blessed are you because you are special. And Mary responds by breaking into this song, Mary's song, the Magnificat. And one of the interesting things about it, one of the things I like, is that at least in the NIV version, she uses the word me or my 4 times. But she uses the word he or his or him, referring to God, 12 times. And throws in 3 uses of God's name, different names for God as well. And even when she does say me, it's usually directed at God. So, for example, she says, my soul glorifies the Lord. She only mentions herself in order to point it back towards God. Mary's not singing about how great she is. And in fairness, you know, she'd have a reasonable shout for going, do you know what, out of all the people in the whole of history and in the whole world, only one of them got picked to be Jesus's mum, and it's me. Well done, me. You know, you'd give her a little bit of slack there, I feel, because she's done quite well. But she doesn't. She's not interested in her own worthiness or how great she is. What she sings about is God. And in fact, not even, isn't it great that God picked me? Some of what she sings about isn't relevant to her or to the pregnancy or any. She just goes, isn't God great because he feeds hungry people? That's not connected. But she says it anyway, because it's true. It's not about what God's just done. It's not about her. It's just about saying, this is an amazing thing, and I am going to rejoice and praise God. And then, unsurprisingly, we see that pattern repeated with her son, with Jesus. And Luke 7, that's why we read that bit, is a really good example. And this is the bit, this is one of my favorite passages in the Bible. I love this bit. So John's disciples, they come to Jesus because John is like, is he the Messiah? And it's always an interesting question because earlier on, John's gone, you are the Messiah. And now he's going, is he? And you're never sure if he's just rhetorically asking his disciples so they'll go and find out, or whether he's suddenly having doubts Now he's in prison. But for whatever reason, he sends these disciples to Jesus to say, are you Messiah? And Jesus' response is cool. He doesn't go, yes, which would be the obvious and true thing. He could just say, yes, I am Messiah. Isn't that great? Go back, tell John he's right. He doesn't do that. He doesn't go, it's me, Jesus. Do you not? It's me. Of course I am. Look at all the cool stuff I've done. It's me. Which would kind of be the theological equivalent of someone going, don't you know who I am? And trying to get into a nightclub or something. And weirdly, Jesus is probably the one person ever who could get away with that. You know, if you're actually God walking around, it's not unfair to go, do you not know who I am? I'm God. That's, maybe you can get away with it then. But Jesus doesn't do that either. He doesn't just go, I'm Jesus. Instead, and at least in my head, I just imagine him kind of going and gesturing and opening his arms and pointing to the people around him. And he says this, go back and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me. And what I love about this is the simplicity and the humility. Jesus isn't making claims for himself. He's turning the question back to the disciples. He's basically saying, well, what do you think? What do you think? Who do you think that I am? Because it's interesting that he doesn't even say, look what I've done. He doesn't say, I have given the blind their sight back. I have made the lame walk. I have cleansed people of leprosy. And to be honest, if that was me, if I'd done those things, I'd be making sure my name was on it. Like, I did that. I prayed for that guy and he was blind and now he's not. I did that, everyone. I'd want you to know, because that would be cool. But Jesus doesn't. Jesus doesn't mention himself there at all. He just says, look, here are some deaf people who are no longer deaf. Here are some lame people that are no longer lame. What matters is the result. What matters is that people who were blind now see. It doesn't matter who did it. It matters that it was done. You see something similar in Luke 9. If you were to skip ahead a couple of chapters, there's a bit where the disciples come to Jesus and say, we found this guy. He was casting out demons in your name, but we stopped him because he's not one of us. And Jesus goes, it doesn't say your numpties, but he basically goes, no, that was wrong. You shouldn't have done that. Let him cast out demons because he's doing a good thing. And whoever is not against you is for you. In effect, it doesn't matter who's casting out the demons. It doesn't matter if it's me, Jesus. It doesn't matter if it's you, the disciples. It doesn't matter if it's this stranger guy that you've never met before. Demons were cast out. That's a good thing. Let's be pleased about it. It doesn't matter who did it. So we see this pattern in Mary first and then in Jesus, and he teaches the disciples that it's not about you. It's not about what God is doing around you or through you. It's what God has done that is the important thing. You might also notice that Mary and Jesus, neither of them are particularly interested in their personal circumstances, if you like. See, for Mary, being at this point a unmarried teenage girl living in Judea, being pregnant, not ideal, honestly, because, well, if you're not married, you've had sex outside marriage, and that's adultery, and the penalty for adultery is being stoned to death. So that's what Mary's got on the horizon. Potentially, she's facing the death penalty. We know, because it's in the Bible, that Joseph planned to break off the betrothal, the engagement. He was going to leave her because he assumed that she'd been playing away. And that would have reduced her to kind of absolute pariah status. She would have been jobless. She couldn't probably have got into another relationship. She would have been reduced to sort of begging and gleaning and an absolute life of poverty and desperation because of what was going on in her life. And you get none of that in her song. You get none of, oh, this could be a bit tricky, couldn't it, God? You just get, God is doing a cool thing, I'm going to rejoice in it. And likewise, Jesus. Jesus is not on the receiving end of these miracles. No one's doing miracles on Jesus. In fact, by doing these miracles, he's attracting enmity. He's attracting opposition. He's going to get grief throughout his ministry. He's only doing it for 3 years, but he gets grief throughout those 3 years. And his life would have been so much easier if he just kept his head down. If he said nothing, hadn't done all those miracles. Now, we know that, Jesus wasn't ever going to do that. But he could have done. But instead, he chooses to rejoice in the good things that God is doing for other people. Now, the question is, can we say that about ourselves? Do we rejoice and celebrate when good things happen to other people instead of us? Now, I'm going to mention the football. Last night did not really go the way I wanted it to for preaching purposes. Would have been better if we were still in, but there we go. So I'm going to ignore that game completely. The previous game we played was Senegal. We played against Senegal, and there was this great moment. I'm mentioning this because there was this moment when Jude Bellingham, who's one of our players, in the middle somewhere, I'm not entirely sure where, but he went running off with the ball and he did a really good run, and he looked back and he saw Jordan Henderson in a lot of space, and he passed the ball to Henderson, and Henderson actually looked pretty smooth. He just came on and kicked the ball in the goal. Yay, England, goal. And what happened next was cool. Henderson, instead of going, yeah, I got a goal, he ran across the pitch pointing at Jude Bellingham. You can go and watch it on the highlights. He basically finds Jude Bellingham, he goes, you, awesome, and runs towards him going, that was great. And then he gets to him, and the two of them just sort of grab each other by the shoulder, and they're sort of face to face. And I'm not up to the lip reading of it, but as far as I can see from the faces and the emotion, Jordan Henderson is going, that was awesome, you did so well. And Jude Bellingham's going, you did really well, it was a great goal. Oh, you're brilliant too, hooray. But it just looked like what he was more excited about. He wasn't so excited about, I've scored a goal. He was more excited about, that was a great pass. You did really well. People are going to clap you. He rejoiced in his teammates' success more, as far as I could see, than he rejoiced in his own. And that's the one bit of the game that really stood out to me, not the actual football, but that moment of him just running across the pitch, pointing. See, that's the thing about today being Gaudete Sunday, about joyful Sunday, rejoicing Sunday. It is about rejoicing and celebrating, but it's not about us. And what that means is that if you are currently having a terrible week or a terrible month or a terrible year, do you know what? You can still rejoice. You can still rejoice because God is still doing good things. I'm told by the internet, so do feel free to take a pinch of salt here, but I did, as far as I can see, this is legitimate numbers. Over the last decade, the worldwide Christian population grew by about 20 million a year. What that means is slightly more than 30 people every minute. And we've been going for 65 minutes. It's a lot of people. Bother, can't do that quickly in my head. Too many wrong numbers. Someone's about to tell me the answer, I'm sure. Thank you, 1,300. There we go. So just since we started this service, 1,300 people have become Christians somewhere in the world. You can rejoice in that. That's something you can rejoice in because God is doing good things. Or just over there is the food bank. Now, we might not rejoice that we need a food bank. That's not necessarily something that, oh, yay, poverty. We're not rejoicing in that, but we might rejoice that knowing that there are people that need help, they can receive it, that people can get the food and the support and the help that they need, and that we can rejoice in. God is doing a good thing. You know, as Paul said in Philippians, rejoice in the Lord. Now, Christmas, talking about food, Christmas as a festival can sometimes become a bit of an abundance fest, an abundance of abundance, if you like. And if you doubt me, think of all those adverts for places like Tesco or Aldi or anywhere where if you're doing Christmas, that means you need to get a 16-foot long table, big white tablecloth, and then just cover it in as much food as you possibly can, like several turkeys, various bowls of veg and stuff and other stuff. And you just look at it and go, there's no way. I don't know enough people that could eat all of that. I couldn't fit it in my house, but I definitely don't know enough people. But that's how it's promoted to us. If you do not have so much food that your table is about to collapse, you are doing Christmas wrong. And at the same time, we live in a world where around 1 in 5 people will go into debt this year so they have enough for Christmas. In some parts of the country, 2/3 of people will spend more than they can afford. They will go beyond their disposable income to pay for Christmas. And for many people, that is celebrating. Stacking it up, piling it high, glorifying in the abundance of it. That's the celebration. But I think actually it's just completely missing the point. Because it's not about what have we got and what can we pile up. That's not the point of Christmas. So perhaps this is the ideal moment to ask ourselves, how does Christmas look for us? How does Christmas look for the people around us? To put it another way, what are we rejoicing in this Christmas? See, it's not wrong to be grateful for the good things that God has done in our lives. I'm not saying we should all be sat in empty rooms and going, no Christmas tree this year. Wrong kind of celebration. I'm not saying that. You know, God does good things and we should be grateful. But as we saw with Mary and as we saw with Jesus, that's not the focus of our praise. See, perhaps the question we should really be asking is, what do the people around us have to be joyful about? And then when we've asked that question, we could ask, what can I do to give them something else to rejoice in? What can I give? Or what can I say? Or what can I do to make God more present in their lives? So it's not as simple as just going, right, I'll get them an extra present then. When I go shopping, I'll get an extra chocolate bar, shove it through the letterbox next door, job done. Something to rejoice about. I mean, you could do that. I'm not saying don't do that. That'd be a cool thing to do. But that's not the answer. That's not right. We're done. And I was thinking about the greatest Christmas movie ever made, Muppets Christmas Carol. You laugh, but you know it's true. It is. It's so good. You can still buy the book of the movie in most bookshops now. Some guy called Charles Dickens novelized it. So, yeah, I can't say that for a lot of Christmas movies. In the movie, Scrooge is transformed. Spoilers for Dickensian era books, but it ends well. Scrooge is transformed. And part of the way that's worked out, and part of the way we see that, is that he goes out and he buys the prized turkey and he goes round to the Cratchit's house and here's the turkey and here's the feast. Here's that abundance thing, have a pay rise. But what I love about the story, and I mean, the version I know is the Muppets Christmas Carol, is that at the end, there's this throwaway line of narration where they go, oh yeah, and also Tiny Tim, who does not die, because that's what we see in the future. Scrooge becomes like a second father to him. And he grows up and it's brilliant, and Tiny Tim has a wonderful life. And I mean, that's right there when you watch that on Christmas Eve anyway. But that's the thing. It's not the turkey, it's not the food. That, I think, is the real gift that Scrooge gives them. is the way that he comes into their lives and transforms it in that way. And do you know what? If someone gave me a large turkey, I'd remember it for a year or so. If someone saved the life of my kid, I wouldn't forget that. That would be the thing that I would rejoice in. It's not the abundance. It's what he does for them that helps them to rejoice. Whose Christmas is going to be better this year because of you? In fact, forget the calendar. Whose life is going to be better because of you? Who's going to have something else to celebrate because of what you do? See, I mentioned the England football team earlier. And you might have thought, it's not a great example, Dave, because obviously they celebrate together because they're on the same team. If he scores, he benefits. Yes. As it happens, we're all on the same team. The Bible tells us this. This is not an example. The Bible says to us, we are one body. When one part of us succeeds, we all succeed. When one part of us rejoices, we all rejoice. So if we can help somebody else to rejoice, we win in the good way. We're on the same team. And that's the beauty of this rejoicing and Christmas and everything, is it's not an either or situation. It's not, we don't have to make a choice. We don't have to say either they can have something to rejoice about or we can have something to rejoice about. I don't know which one to choose. Maybe it should be me. It's actually a both and. We can both rejoice. I can give you something to rejoice about, and then I can rejoice about the fact that you're rejoicing about that thing. We both win. We both rejoice. We rejoice in the blessings of others. We rejoice in their rejoicing. There are 2 weeks to go until Christmas, exactly 2 weeks to go until Christmas. And you can think of this as a Christmas thing. But beyond that, there is the rest of our lives. Because this is not just a Christmas thing. Let's embrace the joy that comes from knowing Jesus. And then let's seek to share that joy with everyone around us. So that Christmas, not Christmas, whenever it is, we can all rejoice together.